This is Flock and Hive, a place to explore the things you always wanted to know more about, as well as the things you didn't know you wanted to know. And this week,
smell is the one that's more closely linked to our sort of emotions, our memories, our mood, behaviours, the real sort of primal sense, unlike any other sense. And that's then the impact of having a problem or loss in the sense of smell, is it can be quite a profound emotional, psychological impact for people.
We speak to Duncan Boak about anosmia.
hello, and thank you so much for joining us again.
Hello.
So today we're talking about what really is the forgotten sense and the devastating effects of losing it that not nearly enough of us know about. And that is smell.
Anosmia. Now, it has come to the forefront, hasn't it, a bit over recent years, purely because of COVID.
Yep.
It's the first time many of us would have even known that it was a thing, really. It affects every aspect of your life if you lose your sense of smell, doesn't it?
It does. And yet it's something that I think most of us, if we were told you have to choose one sense to lose, would probably go for that initially because we haven't considered what happens if you don't have it.
Yeah, it's a very invisible disability, isn't it? You feel like almost it wouldn't really disable you in any ways, just on the surface. But as Duncan mentions, it runs much, much deeper.
Yes, it does. So Duncan Boak, he is the founder of the Fifth Sense charity for smell and taste disorders. He has anosmia himself after having an accident, but he's made it his life's work to educate people on how important it is to look after your sense of smell because of all the areas of your life that it affects. And of course, he'll be talking about those a bit later. And that brings us to the word of the week, which when you think about it, you'll start to get a real sense of why your sense of smell is so important. And that is aromacology. Do you know what this is?
Well, I'm sensing that aroma has something to do with smell and the ecology. I don't know, not the study of it or the application of it.
Well, yes, that's it. So aromacology is the study of the effect of smells on human behavior. So how they affect your feelings and emotions. So there's an actual area of study for this.
Is aromacology first and foremost sitting in the medical world at the moment? Like, is that why this is a thing? Or is this more used by professionals in industries like perfumery or, or even wine, where that sense of smell is really important? Like, where does this sit? Where's the importance of aromacology at the moment?
Well, it is defined as a scientific, data-driven type of study, which comes from medical, really, and that side. But it is used a lot in the perfume industry, not in the wine industry, as far as I'm aware, at all. And I think that needs to change.
Well, I suppose there's another element of emotions being linked to wine, and that's the effect of the alcohol rather than the smell. So I imagine that's probably a bit more of a grey area.
But it is, but that touches on the fact that actually taste is mostly smell anyway. So yeah, it's all linked.
You've always been really sensitive to smell, haven't you? And that obviously must be why you do the job you do now.
Yeah, I guess it must be. I thought everyone was, but not necessarily everyone is. Though you can train your sense of smell. I'm so sensitive to smells. In fact, some smells make me deeply, deeply angry.
What?
Yeah, irrationally so, perhaps. And I'm sure there's some deeper things going on. Yeah, I mean, but particularly for me, if someone is wearing a really what I call shouty perfume, um, no offense to Terry Mugler's Angel, but that is a shouty perfume. I quite like the smell sort of if I'm go, oh, okay, but then I can take it or leave it. If someone is putting that smell or something so shouty like that in my face, in my space when I haven't asked for it, I find it really rude and offensive. And I have to check myself because that is a bit mad.
Is that not just the amount they've put on?
It's a combination of both. I just think it's like you're forcing something in someone else's face, a bit like smoking, which is when I say it out loud, that is a bit.
No, I totally get that, though I have been guilty of being a douser and particularly of Angel as well. And I can even date it. What's interesting is you even just saying the word Angel relative to a perfume does something to my synesthesia where I am taken back to 1999 through to 2001, and particularly the era of dating a lovely guy from Manchester. But I'm taken back there just from you talking about the smell that there's then really evocative. But Angel is it is intense, isn't it?
Yeah.
And also The male equivalent was the Jean-Paul Gaultier as well, wasn't it? That was very shouty and very trendy a few years earlier than Angel, I think.
What smells make you angry?
I don't. There isn't one that necessarily makes me angry. Maybe I have the opposite. There's definitely, and this is a bit weird, and my kids take the piss out of me for this, but I just love the smell of manure.
That is not what I was expecting you to say.
I was obsessed with horses when I grew up, and I went to this thing called horse rangers where you were allowed to go. Basically, it was slave labor because for little kids who didn't have a horse, you could go and clean out the stables of someone who did and pretend for a few moments that you had a horse. And every 2 weeks you got to ride it, even though you cleaned it out every week. Figure that one out. But anyway, I love the smell of straw and that sweaty smell of the horse, but also encompassed in that in the environment was just a lot of manure, which horse manure isn't really that offensive. But it also connects me with my absolute love for farms because there's this enveloping smell when I'm driving to my favorite place in the whole world, and it just gets me excited and relaxed and ready to party at the same time. And that is On the Way to Glastonbury.
That's a really lovely one. I have a smell that calms me and excites me at the same time as well, and it's coffee and pastries. I mean, it's a beautiful smell anyway, but I've realized it's because I associate that with the very start of the day where there's so much potential. But also I had a period of my life where I would get up an hour and a half early for work, get on the bus when no one was on it, and sit in a cafe to write my book. And it was like secret time that was mine, and I didn't have to worry about what anyone else thought for that glorious hour and 50 minutes while I was in the cafe.
I have a bit more of a lowbrow version of that. And I'm not even a smoker, but there's something about the smell of beer and cigarettes in the sunshine, like a sunshine drenched concrete floor of a pub garden, is a very specific combination, which is weird because I don't smoke.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The difference between us two sisters, the younger one is all about horse shit and old fags, whereas the older one is all about fine coffee and pastries and perfume.
It's true. It's true. Oh, God. This simultaneously makes me want to ride a horse, drinking a pint of beer and smoke.
I just want to sit in a cafe and be on my own.
No one go near her with Angel on.
Yeah, warning. But I think what all of this does point to is the fact that how bloody grateful should we be that we can have all these thoughts and memory stimulation from having a sense of smell. Also, there's so much more to what Duncan talks about than just anosmia, which is a loss, like a full loss or partial loss of your sense of smell. He talks about something called parosmia, something called phantosmia, and other things, which I will, of course, leave him to explain. So I think now is the time to dive into that conversation, don't you?
Yeah.
Here's what Duncan Boak from Fifth Sense had to say.
Duncan Boak, it's wonderful to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for coming in. So you are the founder and the chief executive of Fifth Sense, which is a charity for those with smell and taste disorders. Now, especially since COVID, many of us have become more and more aware that losing your sense of smell and taste can have a massive effect on your mental health. But it's so much more than that, actually, isn't it? Can you tell us your story, why you set up Fifth Sense and why everyone needs to know about it?
Absolutely. And so, yeah, Fifth Sense came from my own personal experience of losing my sense of smell back in 2005 when I was 22 years old. I had a nasty fall down a flight of stairs, landed on the back of my head on a concrete floor, woke up in hospital, lucky to be alive. And it was after I came out of hospital and was eating the first meal I'd had since the accident that I realised I thought it doesn't taste of anything. And that's when I realised I couldn't smell. My first reaction was, this is strange. I didn't know you could lose your sense of smell. And when I went to see my doctor about this, their reaction was quite similar. Heard of this happen before, but it's quite rare. We don't know very much about it. Nothing can be done. And I spent the next sort of 6 years thinking I was one of the only people on the planet with this. I never met anyone or came across anyone else who knew anything about it. It wasn't until 2011 when this book came out by this American girl called Molly Birnbaum about her experience of losing a sense of smell, and I read this avidly, and it was transformational. And in the book, I read about this Professor Thomas Hummel in Germany, who I wrote to. He introduced me to an ear, nose and throat surgeon in the UK, Carl Philpott, who'd set up the UK's first NHS clinic for smell and taste disorders. Carl and I started talking. I had the idea to put my negative experience, into a bit of a positive frame and set up the first charity for these issues. And Fifth Sense was born.
Wow. So there isn't just one type of what we call anosmia, is there, where you lose your sense of... Is that just you're losing your sense of smell, or is that smell and taste? Can you explain the different kinds?
Sure. So anosmia refers to a loss or lack of the sense of smell. And it's important to mention that there are those of us who have lost the sense of smell, okay, so acquired anosmia, but then there are people, smaller number of people, who are born without a sense of smell. Congenital anosmia. And as you can probably imagine, the two experiences are very different. So there's feelings of, emotional loss, of bereavement, of disconnection. They tend to be more deeply felt by those people who have lost the sense of smell. Whereas with congenital anosmia, there's not that same sense of loss.
Of course, they don't know what they're missing, I suppose.
No, that's it. But then there's the not being able to smell, and anosmia refers to a complete lack of smell. But then we also have hyposmia, which refers to a reduced sense of smell. But then also, and COVID has really highlighted this, something called parosmia, which is a term to describe a distorted sense of smell. So people being able to detect odours, but they don't smell the way they should, and that's often quite unpleasant.
I've heard of rotten eggs and everything, and just things that really shouldn't smell like that at all. And do they just kind of appear out of nowhere as well, like a phantom?
Parosmia is triggered by smells. So that's people detecting odours. So imagine walking past a coffee shop and rather than the delicious smell of freshly brewed coffee, it smells like raw sewage.
Yeah, God, no.
So that's parosmia, and the impact that can have on people can often be worse than the actual loss of smell, because that can stop people from, makes people avoid social situations, avoid going out, avoid restaurants, cafes. You also mentioned phantom smells, so there's phantosmia.
Oh, that is a thing?
It's a thing.
Oh,
it's
wow.
a thing, yeah. So that's when people think they can smell a real odour, but there's no source of that odour present. I can think of an old friend of mine. He lost his sense of smell following a head injury, and he had a period where he could smell garlic all the time. No garlic there.
That's so strange, but must be really discombobulating. Now, you have talked before about how people didn't really know much about this, and it wasn't something, well, it still isn't really something that people talk about, because when you think about your senses, I think you ask most people and they would say the most important, obviously, is eyesight and then maybe hearing. But actually, when you think about what the sense of smell gives you, it's so much more important than maybe any of them. Would you agree with that?
What I'd say is that there's this sort of artificial hierarchy that's kind of developed in people's perceptions, based around, people think about eyesight and hearing and how important they are, but don't really sort of think of the sense of smell as being that important. And this is where the name of the charity came from, because smell is often seen by people as the fifth and least important. I've had conversations with people over the years, and more than one occasion where someone said to me, "Yeah, but if you had to lose one, Duncan, it would be that one, wouldn't it?"
Right.
And I'm like, wow, I can't believe you said that to me, frankly. But the thing is, we've got these 5 ways in which we connect with the world around us. They're all of equal importance, but they work in very different but complementary ways. Take any one of those away, and it has a detrimental effect on our quality of life. Smell is the one that's more closely linked to our sort of emotions, our memories, our mood, behaviours, the real sort of primal sense. And it connects us to people, to places in an emotional way, unlike any other sense. And that's then the impact of having a problem or loss of the sense of smell, is it can be quite a profound emotional, psychological impact for people.
Quite isolating, I imagine. Absolutely.
Yeah, people can feel very cut off from the world around them and from others in it. And so, I mean, that's been my experience. One of the challenges that there's been for me is how it affected relationships. So, if you think about not being able to smell your partner anymore, and that sort of sense of closeness and intimacy and connection the smell gives, you take that away and it can create a distance.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. Do you know much about pheromones in this regard? I know that some people don't even think they exist, but I know that when I was learning how to tango, I was partnered with this guy I'd never met before. He wasn't particularly good looking or anything, but I just wanted to wrap myself around him. And I know it came from my nose. But I wonder, if you can't smell, do you still get the effect? Is it more chemical, or do you just lose that entirely? I think from what you've just said, you lose it, but tell me what you think.
Very good question. So with regards to pheromones, there's no evidence of them existing in humans. They do in animals and insects, for example, but not in humans. But there are other ways in which smell connects us and attracts us to others. And there's research that suggests that our DNA is expressed in our body odor. Okay, so when we, moments like that, when you're doing the tango with some guy you've never met before, and you're thinking, oh my God, well, I'm really, really attracted to him, and it's the smell that's doing that. But is it our bodies are basically sort of saying to us that that's an ideal mate for us genetically, and we should go home.
Yeah. That's a great chat-up line, that as well, isn't it? I think you'd be a great genetic match for my children. Yes.
I'll have to try that one.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about the effect on mental health and on connection. Is there anything physical that losing your sense of smell brings to the table that people don't realise?
What's important to think about is the knock-on impact of a loss of smell. Okay, you'll understand this given what you do professionally. You're interested in food and drink. Lose your sense of smell, and people's diet will change because they'll lose interest in eating. People might eat less because they don't enjoy food anymore, or people might start eating more sugary, salty foods where they can still detect those basic tastes and actually gain weight as a result. So diet changes and nutrition can suffer. And then the impact that can have on physical health over time, because one of the issues we've got is there aren't a great many treatments for loss of smell depending on the cause. So for many, for me it's been 2005 and nothing's changed. It's a chronic issue. So unless people take steps to sort of manage that and manage their diet and make sure they're getting the right sort of nutritional intake, it can have a long-term physical effect. There's research that shows links between poor sense of smell and increased risk of frailty in older adults. Some work by a chap called Nicholas Rowan and colleagues has demonstrated this. So yeah, there are significant issues that can be caused. I think another thing as well is safety.
Yes. Gas, I guess, is a big obvious one, isn't there?
The reason natural gas has a smell is because they put a substance into it, mercaptan, to give it a smell.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
did not
odorless.
know that.
The smell is the smell. That chemical is the warning signal. It's the olfactory equivalent of a red flashing light. But unfortunately, no one thought, well, what if you can't smell it? So we at Fifth Sense, we're doing a big project in partnership with a company called Cadent, who are the UK's largest gas distribution network. And this is all about smell and safety, to highlight the importance of staying safe and well at home if you have a poor or no sense of smell. And given that significant numbers of people over the age of 65, research suggests that as many as 25% of people have some degree of olfactory dysfunction, then, think about older people living alone. There's a safety issue there, and also the fact that all right, you can go into B&Q or Homebase. We might want to edit that out for sort of. you can go into a DIY hardware store and buy a smoke detector, but there's currently no natural gas detector available, low-cost natural gas detector available to buy on the high street in the UK. Yeah.
That's extraordinary. Okay, so this is why education in this area is so important. Is there anything else that we might not have thought of in terms of safety that we need our sense of smell for, but that we completely take for granted?
I think food.
As in if it's off or...
Yeah,
of course,
food that's gone off. How many times can if you think about when you've opened the fridge and looked at something that's, a packet of food or, whatever that's been opened a few days ago, and you've kind of gone, is that still okay to eat? And you've sniffed it.
Yeah.
Well, what if you can't do that? And again, what if you live alone and you don't have someone else you can ask to check for you? What can happen if you eat that? Sickness, food poisoning. But then also there's another aspect of this. There's the anxiety and worry that the safety risks create for people. And again, thinking about those who live alone, there's such a sort of a mental, psychological burden associated with smell loss. And these other issues, diet and nutrition and safety concerns, just sort of adds to that.
And I guess you might worry all the time that, do you smell? How do you know? And that's probably not to be sniffed at, if you pardon the pun, that, if you're worrying about that, that's going to have an effect.
Yeah, absolutely. We did a piece of research a few years ago, and I remember one of the comments from that was about from someone who said, I cycle to work and we don't actually have any, showers at work. So he said, I get changed, but all the time I'm sort of conscious that I put deodorant on, but all the time I'm conscious of, what if I smell? And, people are just too polite to say anything to me. So this kind of ongoing kind of anxiety that it creates. Yeah, I think about professionals and people who rely on their sense of smell in a professional setting. So what about a nurse who can't use a sense of smell to tell if a wound is infected? What about a police officer who is unable to detect the smell of cannabis or other sorts of drugs on a suspect's breath or alcohol when they're making an arrest?
Yeah.
So there's not that same level of cue to know if someone's intoxicated. Going back to the safety thing, and I'm going to reference one of our volunteers, our ambassadors, Carl Hughes, who works for the Metropolitan Police in this. I remember talking to Carl, and he said, imagine a police officer being called out on their own, being called out to report of an elderly person having collapsed in their own home. That police officer's got no sense of smell. They unwittingly go into that environment, and what they don't realise is that person's collapsed because of a leak of gas.
Right. I remember when I had COVID the first time, I was one of the early adopters, and it was before they realised that losing your sense of smell was part of it.
Right.
And it came out a couple of days later. But, being someone who's tasted wine for the last 22 years and spirits, and that is it's not just my career, it's my absolute passion.
Right.
And I love perfume. The panic I felt when I realised that, when I was let out of my room after a week and I just wanted a bath with lavender salts. I just wanted that clean, fresh, almost medicinal smell, and there was like a metallic, and I knew that I couldn't smell anything. And honestly, during the course of that week, I was slightly worried about my heart, I was slightly worried about my lungs, but this just made me think, wow, I might have to change my whole world, and I don't want that.
Right, absolutely. The panic there must have been.
Yeah.
And then imagine going to see your doctor, about that and saying, look, this is massive for me, what can I do? And your doctor says, well, not much we can do. At least it's only a sense of smell. And that's the sort of reaction that we've been up against for such a long time, and it's that needs to change. We've really, really got to get to a point where we recognise the senses of smell and taste as being essential to our life, our quality of life, health and well-being.
It's talking about it, isn't it? Because I can imagine when that's a reaction even from professionals, it's not something you want to bring up with your friends and family. You don't feel like it's a big enough deal, even though you've been dealing with all of that.
Yeah, absolutely, and that adds further to the isolation that people feel, that people can't talk about it because they're going to get dismissed, or feel that they shouldn't talk about it because, it's not that serious. I've not gone blind, I've not gone deaf. Again, it's that sort of reaction, and it's this thing of dealing with sensory impairments that even after COVID, unrecognised and marginalised. The thing is, as we've explained already, this is an issue that has significant consequences for people's health and well-being. But there's also, we know that the loss of smell is associated with neurodegenerative disease. And also, loss of smell in older adults can be associated with increased risk of mortality. And, there is one thing that could be really, really, really beneficial in terms of using smell as a marker and an early indicator for some of these things, and that's testing the sense of smell.
Does anyone do that anywhere that you've seen?
It happens in, let's say, a relative handful of ENT and specialist smell and taste clinics at the moment. Yet you can go down the high street and get your eyesight and hearing tested. Okay, we need to get to the point, and this is one of the big aims and objectives of Fifth Sense, is to get to the point where smell testing is ubiquitous, and you can go down the high street and get your sense of smell tested just as you can get your eyesight or hearing.
Because if that really is an early indicator of something, that's so important. I heard that smelling practice can stave off dementia and neurodegenerative diseases. Is that something you've heard as well?
There has been research around that. We're working with researchers at University College London at the moment who have developed this digital smell emitting device, and we're partway through a project where this device has been placed into people's homes, and they're using it actively on a daily basis to, mindfully smell different odours. And in terms of the people involved, we've got people who have got olfactory impairment, see if this can help improve their sense of smell over time. I think there's also something here about encouraging people to actively use their sense of smell regularly as much as they can, and actually what benefits that can have for people's mental well-being and cognitive function later in life. Basically, I just think we've got so much more to uncover about just how important smell is in the context of healthy ageing. There's some big discoveries still to come.
Well, I'm very glad that you're at the forefront of getting this message out there, and it's starting here in the UK and hopefully elsewhere very, very quickly. So tell us more about what Fifth Sense are doing, what's coming up.
So a big part of what the charity does is about providing direct support and information to people experiencing problems with the sense of smell or taste. So that's something we're working on growing and developing. The idea of having more face-to-face events. Part of the project that we're doing supported by Cadent, the gas network, member of my team, Helen, is doing an absolutely amazing job of delivering training and education sessions to different professional groups, different organisations. So we've recently done some work with the Stroke Association, which has gone really well. We've in 2023 we've delivered education and training sessions to about 40 NHS England post-COVID services to give them the understanding and tools that they need to be able to support patients. So our outreach work is going to continue growing too.
There are so many industries out there that you could take this message to, like food and drink for me. Obviously, that's my world. But why aren't there big drinks companies trying to raise awareness? Because it's good for them as well as everyone else. Like to your point about how many people over the age of 65 might have lost their sense of smell because of age, and how much disposable income they have for a nice bottle of wine, for example. Just they're missing out on something here, aren't they?
Absolutely. There's this sort of massive gap in knowledge. There's this increasing body of research that demonstrates this, but people are blissfully unaware. When we did a really interesting event earlier in the year, a fundraising event led by a lady called Rebecca Mitchell, who's a wine educator and sommelier, and it was a wine tasting fundraiser we held in Exeter, where Rebecca basically took people through the tasting of the first 3 wines from the perspective of someone with a smell disorder. So did anosmia, did parosmia, and did phantosmia as well. And people really got into it. And then the questions and people wanted to talk about it. So it was a fundraising event primarily, but it ended up being this really brilliant educational event as well. And we're planning on doing some more of those wine tasting events in 2024. So watch this space.
I'm very happy to hear that. Yes, and I'm very happy to shout about them as well, because you make something a little more fun. You amplify the message. Exactly.
I think part of what I've done over the years with Fifth Sense is you've got to make it interesting and accessible. We can't just stand and bang this drum talking about how terrible it is not to be able to smell, because people go, yeah, but there's worse things that could happen. But if you actually kind of go, well, this is something that you don't think about. This is something that's really important that you don't necessarily pay attention to, but if you lose it or have problems with it, it potentially has significant implications for you. But you do that in a fun, accessible, engaging way, people want to get involved, and then people start to listen and understand.
So why don't you tell people how to find you?
Get online, head over to www.fifthsense.org.uk. We're also on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn for the business, more business minded amongst you. And anyone who's listening to this who's got a question or who wants to get in touch, drop us an email. It's info@fifthsense.org.uk, and Mags from our team will pick it up and be happy to answer any questions you have.
Duncan Boak, thank you very much. That was fascinating.
Thoughts?
I love his delivery. I love his passion. Eye-opening, really quite heartbreaking as well, and definitely echoes what Barry Smith says in the first episode of Flock and Hive about the gravity of that sense of loss, and that you have to grieve it because of the associations you have with your sense of smell. But this interview obviously builds on how much deeper that runs as well, especially particularly the connectedness with your environment, with people. I mean, it's not just a physical thing.
And we really take it for granted, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, like you said in the interview, you genuinely don't know it's there until it's gone. Just the smell of your own home, you're not consciously aware of, but it is there in you. If it was missing suddenly, like if you can't smell your partner, I used to sniff my baby's breath after they fed. This sounds really weird, but it is very primitive thing. I used to just be all up in their face, and I love, even in the mornings, I love the smell of their little like sleepy bad breath. Just had to be so connected to them. I used to lick their head too.
Hang on. You used to lick their head. Look, I was with you up to that point because I think that's a really important way a mother's bond with babies is through that smell. I know that kind of baby morning breath yawn smell. I love it. Let's just back up a minute. Are you a cat? Why are you licking your baby's head?
I don't know. It was just part of it. Though actually my first son he never really had hair till he was about 4. It was sort of like fuzzy felt. And it just felt so, he just tasted so great. Something was going on there.
So you licked it.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, there is nothing more beautiful, I think, than the smell of, especially your own baby's head. That is a well-known thing, isn't it? In fact, some fragrances that I've come across have that in them. There's one called, I think it's ILK, and it's Sincere, I think is the name of it, and that's what it smells like, and that's what it's based on.
Who's supposed to wear that then? Who wants to
No,
smell like a baby's head?
it was the first time I've ever thought about having a fragrance to wear to bed because it's just really calming. It's beautiful. It's a perfume. It's a normal perfume, but it has that kind of edge to it. It's kind of creamy, slightly fuzzy peachy.
Make you feel like you're back in the womb.
Yeah, totally. That's beautiful smells. But part of this conversation that I really loved that I found fascinating were these words that I'd never heard of, like parosmia and phantosmia. Parosmia, where, my God, where you are smelling something, but your senses turn it into something always utterly disgusting.
What I find interesting is, why is it always the distorted smell is turned into a foul one and a revolting one? Could it be because the body's trying to protect you? Because the body must be aware that, something's off balance. Your sense of smell is off kilter. And maybe the reason it produces the smells as disgusting is to sort of keep you away and give your body the message that something's not right, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I researched this a bit and I couldn't find the answer to that question, like why is it always bad smells? But I would wager that you're right there. It's your body giving you a warning that something is wrong.
That's also really, really hard hitting as well, isn't it? Just that you must feel really anxious and you've got a whole safety net just taken away from you when you lose your sense of smell. I'm obsessed with our carbon monoxide monitor because I know I can't smell it. So imagine if everything like that is taken off the table. You must feel really vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people are getting a really great sense of how fun you are with your horse shit and your bags and now your obsession with carbon monoxide monitors. But no, I don't mean to belittle this at all. But yeah, just the lack of safety, isn't it? So phantosmia, which is where phantom smells just turn up, where there wasn't a smell in the first place, unlike parosmia. And unlike parosmia as well, the smells can be completely normal smells and quite nice smells as well as bad smells. That I found particularly interesting because it really made me think of that episode that we did with Jessica Lynn, the medium, about where she would get this smell that is just to her as her grandmother. And Duncan was talking about the person he knows where he just randomly smells garlic everywhere. And it just makes me think for the very first time that phantosmia, could that be the spirit world? Is there a link there as well? Maybe Duncan's friend has a French chef in his past that liked to cook a lot of garlic that's trying to give him a message. I don't know.
Maybe in his past life, he was garlic.
Maybe.
Do you know what? I looked on the Fifth Sense website, actually. I was really interesting just looking at people's accounts. And there's this one girl who describes her really heartbreaking journey of losing her sense of smell, where the doctors just weren't, it's not that they weren't taking it seriously, they were just very casual about it. Like, well, can't really figure it out. We'll have a few tests, but maybe this is just something that we can't really change or even look into. It's just what it is, and you have to live with it. We're kind of brushing it off as not that important, which kind of makes me angry because that happens a lot with things that are slightly less definable. But what was really interesting in this account is that at the end of her description, she says, and do you know what? This is going to sound a bit bonkers, but I'm actually really grateful for COVID because it has just opened the whole world up to the fact that this is a thing.
That's right. And Duncan said the same. I mean, the good thing about COVID was at least awareness of his charity, which is so important, Fifth Sense. I mentioned it briefly in the interview with him, but just I cannot stress enough like the terror I felt when I realized that I'd lost my sense of smell. And that's because having done some research about this a few years ago, I knew that viral anosmia, so if you've lost it through a virus like COVID, sometimes it doesn't come back at all. There's still a lot of people in the wine trade who've been writing about wine for years. It's still at about 50%. A couple of people it hasn't come back with at all. So I am so grateful that anything came back. But just the thought that that might be it now. My love of perfume, my love of wine, my love of food, and just my world just felt like it could potentially crumble. And I had to sort of wait a couple of weeks to find out. Awful.
Oh, agonizing wait.
Yeah.
Like the 2-week wait. But yeah, that is a symptom of long COVID, isn't it? Just the smell not coming back.
One of them, absolutely. And obviously there are lots of different ways you can lose your sense of smell, and maybe you never even had it in the first place. I mean, that's a whole different category, isn't it? But I have been grateful for my sense of smell pretty much every single day since, even for the bad smells, even when my family don't make particularly nice smells.
Yeah, that there are smells I'm not looking forward to on my journey towards 3 teenage boys.
Oh my God. Yeah, I do not envy that.
What was also really interesting about this interview is how easy it is to get into your knickers.
What? What do you mean?
I mean, you had a little mini orgasm when he said the word phantosmia. Like, give this girl a new word.
Did I? I didn't notice that.
And also your penchant for rugged Brazilian types that you want to wrap yourself around.
Oh, you talk about the tango.
Yeah.
Oh my God, no, but that's just my point. It wasn't one of the dark-haired, bit of facial hair, quite, well-structured, probably plays the guitar, long hair type at all. It was completely the opposite. He, very nice, shorter than me, usually a no-no, very, very slight, very, very pale, not at all my type. And yet I just wanted him to kiss me. Sorry, husband, but I just did. It was, the attraction was insane.
It just goes to show, doesn't it, that looks aren't everything. It's just that connection on such a deeper chemical level. You would have had wine tasting, tango dancing babies.
I'd like to think it would be that. But as Duncan said, we probably just would have had, compatible immune systems, which isn't as sexy, but arguably more important. Oh, and this reminds me of a study I saw a few years ago when I was doing research for this for something else. There was a whole program where they were trying to matchmake people by giving them a t-shirt to smell. So basically a load of women and a load of men were given a plain white t-shirt to wear in bed for a night. And then they had to pick their partner based on the smell of the t-shirt the next day. Isn't that insane?
Kind of rank, but also makes sense. It's also that attachment thing as well, isn't it? Like if you're leaving your baby for the first time, you give them a piece of your clothing to like put in the cot.
Yeah.
So even it just shows like from infancy, the connection and importance of it all.
Yeah, so important.
Do you think that the equivalent of an optician's on the high street, but for this, would be a really fun place to go?
Well, you could make it fun, couldn't you? Like, you can build other things into it, and actually you can get a diagnosis at the same time. Great idea, should exist.
I mean, my husband loves going to the opticians anyway. He calls it a video game, but in your head. Whereas I hate it because I'm just like, you're going to tell me I'm going blind, but that's #health anxiety. But yeah, we need to elevate our sense of smell to the same importance and to be in our consciousness in terms of looking after it. And he defines that, doesn't he, when he talks about this artificial hierarchy of senses?
Yeah.
Well, how's that managed to happen? So it just goes to show you take that away, you're completely off balance, you're completely off kilter. And it just goes back to the fact that we actually, to be functioning first and foremost and a happy, peaceful, thriving human being, everything needs to be holistically, in sync.
Does. And, let's not even talk about all the other senses that aren't the main five. But there's an article about that on the website. Yeah, but you're right. But that's why I wanted to get Duncan on this podcast, because obviously with the smell and taste, it's a massive part of what I do. It's hugely important to me. And in fact, I'm going to be helping him at a few events later on this year and hopefully moving forward as well. But it's a fascinating organization to be familiar with if you've got someone in your life that's lost their sense of smell or is losing their sense of smell and or taste, or just to educate yourself for the future when we're all a bit older. So that brings us to the close of another episode so seamlessly. Once again, I would say thank you all so much for listening.
And remember that you can take a deeper dive into everything we talk about at flockandhive.com and follow us at Flock and Hive on all the socials.
We've been really enjoying your messages, so please do get in touch with things that you've discovered since listening to this. Again, if you're an expert, get in touch with us so we can get you on this podcast. Also, very importantly, if you are enjoying this, please share it with your friends.
And next week is episode 10, which is the last one of this series, so we can high five ourselves and put that one in the bag.
We can, but that doesn't mean you need to go away. We're just going to be regrouping, finding some fabulous new guests, and getting ready for season 2. So until then, bye-bye.
Bye.